In March of 2018, I was given the incredible opportunity to go to West Africa, specifically to Senegal and the Gambia. And the reason I went there is because, as some of you know, I'm a student of religions, and at the time I was working on my master's thesis about Sufism, and in particular the Tijaniyya Sufi-brotherhood. Originally, this video was intended to be a documentary more like the other one that we have on ancient Norse traditions, but so I filmed a lot in Bogal and such things, and was supposed to interview a lot of my informants, but certain circumstances appeared that made those interviews not possible at the moment. But I still felt like the material that I gathered there was so valuable, and so I thought that maybe I can be the one giving you the context instead, even though I usually don't like speaking for someone else. The Tidjaniyya is a Sufi order or tariqa, sometimes also referred to as brotherhood, that was founded in the 18th and early 19th century by a man named Ahmad al-Tijani, who was born in North Africa and Algeria. Eventually, the Tidjaniyya spread to West Africa and grew larger and larger, especially in the end of the 19th century and early 20th century, where it eventually became the form of Islam practiced by the majority of the population in Senegal and the Gambia. Sufism in general, in fact, is uncommonly popular and common in this region. In Senegal, it is said that 92% of the population is Muslim, and 95% of those 92% belong to a Sufi brotherhood. And there are four major Sufi brotherhoods in this region. The largest is the Tidjaniyya. There's also the Muridiyya, the Qadiriyya, and the Layenes. I'm not sure I'm pronouncing that last one correctly. So I was studying specifically the Tidjaniyya, and I was doing a lot of fieldwork here in Stockholm in one group practicing that faith or belonging to that order, often visiting them during their Saturday dhikr sessions and so on. And it was because of this that I was given the offer by them to follow them to West Africa in March on a pilgrimage to a village in Senegal called Bogal. Now, this is a pilgrimage performed once a year by this group, both most of the members of the group in Stockholm, but also Tijanis from all around the world come to this one rather small village in Senegal called Bogal to visit and meet their Sheikh, or spiritual leader, called Abdulrahman Bari. And this man, I'll refer to him as Bari from now on, he is incredibly important for this group. If you visit one of their homes in Stockholm, there is usually at least one large poster of him in their home. There are small sort of cups that they sell that sort of adorn his face. It shares a lot of similarities with other Sufi orders. They have the same basic practices like dhikr being a meditation or invocation of God's names. They also have this culture of the Sheikh being a spiritual sort of leader that people follow. And there's this very central aspect of Sufism, which is the relationship between a spiritual leader, a Sheikh, and a student. And this is central to the practice. You need a Sheikh, you need a leader to guide you on the spiritual path. And this is no different than the Tidjaniyya. And the Sheikhs in West Africa, in fact, often called marabouts, have incredible power, sometimes even political power over the population there. Another central aspect of Sufism, which is also prevalent in the Tidjaniyya, is the Ziyara, which is obviously the central piece of this video. Ziyara meaning basically pilgrimage, or a visit to a grave or a marabout. It is very common practice to make a pilgrimage to the gravesite or shrine of a deceased saint, Sufi saint, wali or sheikh. But the Ziyara pilgrimage is not exclusive to shrines or dead sheikhs and saints. They can also be performed to ones that are still living. And the Ziyara Bogal is an example of this, because in Bogal, the village, there is no shrine, there is no dead saint or grave of a marabut or anything like that. Instead, the goal of the pilgrimage is Sheikh Abdulrahman Bari, who is still alive today and resides there for large periods of the year. So anyway, after some preparations, I left Sweden on March 25th or 26th or something like that, and went straight to Serekunda in the Gambia, where I met some of my informants. Most of my informants, in fact, were from the Gambia and lived in that city, and so I got to spend some time with them in their hometown. And the Gambia is a country that's basically inside of Senegal. So there is Senegal at the coast of West Africa, and then the Gambia is basically a river that runs from the coast and inland in Senegal. And so Serekunda is right on the coast and right next to the capital city of Banjul. And so we spent a day or two in Serekunda, me and my informants, and most of that time was spent sort of them showing me around. Before, on the Thursday, we rented a bus to travel into Senegal. This pilgrimage is a big deal in the region. And so as we were traveling with the bus, we saw a lot of other large buses with people who were going there, and they were sort of decorated with images of different sheikhs, including Bari, and they would often say Alhamdulillah or Santa Yalla, which means the same thing, praise be to God in Arabic, and Wolof, which is the local language. And so eventually we reached the village of Bogal, which was our destination for this pilgrimage. And while this place was certainly larger than a lot of the other villages we had visited, it was by no means a city or any kind of large place. It was a village out in the middle of nowhere in Senegal. It's actually located in the southern part of Senegal, or well, south of the Gambia, I should say. I originally thought it was in the north, but you know, since you can't find it's such a small place that you can't even find it on a map. So I had to go into Google Maps and sort of find a small mosque that was in the city in order to see that it was even there. The village has kind of a main street with sort of stores placed on the sides, but most of the village is made up of these compounds that I described, where people live and eat and socialize and all of these things.
Bonjour.
Bonjour.
Comment allez-vous?
In the middle of the city, there is an incredibly large and beautiful green mosque that's clearly meant to be the centerpiece of the entire village. It's sort of the center of their religious lives, where people go to pray and all these things. The village of Bogal is a very beautiful place. There's a lot of people there, especially during this pilgrimage. But in spite of me being obviously the only white person in the entire village, I felt incredibly welcomed while I was there. There's this incredible sense of community to the whole situation. That anytime you run into someone on the street, they'll say hello, they'll say salamu alaikum, the Muslim greeting, which means peace be upon you. And if someone is eating, you walk by a family eating in their house, they'll always kind of invite you to come eat with them. So you always feel very welcomed. And the central aspect of this pilgrimage, in various ways, is the Sheikh Abdulrahman Bari. And so the entire pilgrimage is kind of formed around him. And all activities, in one way or another, kind of involve his presence. One of the first things people do when they come there is that they visit him in his home. And this compound of his is always packed with people. And he requires a lot of security personnel, in fact, because people are sort of desperate to get there sometimes. And in our case, we were sort of waiting for him for a while in his living room together with a lot of other people. And eventually, when he entered, there was this silence that came over the room, and everyone stood up and wanted to say hello to him. And then he sat down in a chair, and everyone got the opportunity in small groups to sit with him and speak to him for a few minutes and also pray with him. And as I and my group were given the opportunity to speak to him, he expressed gratitude that we had made this long journey. And he said that it's important that you have made this journey for the sake of Islam and not for my sake, because if it was for my sake, then I wouldn't have deserved it. He also said that a lot of people come there to find God in him, but that he instead always finds God in them. He then prayed for and with us, and that was kind of it. But that's one of the main tenets of this pilgrimage, is meeting the Sheikh and having an opportunity to come in close contact with him. On Friday, there's of course also the Friday prayer, and especially during the Ziyara Bogal, a lot of people come to participate in this prayer. People from the surrounding villages, as well as Tijanis, like I said, from all around the world, basically come here for this pilgrimage. And so the mosque on this occasion was just as full as it could be. There were people even outside the mosque that were praying because they couldn't fit inside. The Sheikh also, of course, attends this Friday prayer, and every time he has to leave his house or his compound and steps out to sort of the streets, he is followed by an army of security personnel, because there is always a huge group of people surrounding him that sing dhikr, la ilaha illallah, and try to get as close to him as possible or to touch him to receive some of that barakah. It's almost reminiscent of a rock star or sort of the Beatles back in the 60s. It's got a similar feel to it. Through the help from his security, he manages to get to the mosque and to other places. And after the regular prayer led by an imam, not the sheikh by the way, the sheikh then holds kind of a speech, you could say, but he never really speaks himself. He has another person next to him with a microphone. So the sheikh will whisper to him, and then this other man will sort of paraphrase what he said. The Sheikh also then receives gifts like money and things like that while he sits there, and then he reads from the Quran, or he recites the Quran. And this he does with his own voice. This is kind of the only time that he speaks himself, is when he prays or recites the Quran.
وقال قرينها ما لدي عتيد ألقيها في جهنم كل كفار عنيد مناع للخير معتد مريب الذي جعل مع الله إلها آخر فألقياه في العذاب الشديد. الله الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر.
Most people in this village wear what could be considered ceremonial clothes, like kaftans, and they always carry around tasbihs, or prayer beads, which they actually have one here. One of these that they carry around either while praying or around their neck like this. And this is especially apparent during the different specific rituals, like the Friday prayer, or later the same day when they have a hadra meeting in the middle of the village. Now, hadra is a meeting where most of the community gathers in one single spot and they do dhikr. Dhikr is one of the most central and universal practices within Sufism. It is often described as a kind of meditation where the names of God are repeated over and over again for long periods of time. Or even more commonly, the first part of the Shahada, the proclamation of faith, La ilaha illallah, there is no God but God, is repeated over and over again in a kind of singing fashion sometimes. But dhikr can be performed in many different ways. Some do it completely silently, others do it very ecstatically, like including dancing and drums and stuff, and others are somewhere in between. The Tidjaniyya have a very melodic dhikr, as you will see from these clips that I'm showing you. It's almost got a kind of singing quality to it. When there isn't any specific rituals or ceremonies performed in the city, people socialize, they walk around, they meet old friends and family. A lot of people sit in their compounds and they sort of prepare food. There are animals walking around in the village freely often, like cows and goats and chickens and stuff. And so everyday people prepare food by slaughtering a cow and then cooking it and eating it the same day and things like that. There's a very immediate kind of feeling to it. The last day of the pilgrimage is the Saturday, and this is also the kind of main event, the main day of the pilgrimage. A lot of people arrive some days before, but on the Saturday is the day that everyone comes there. That's sort of the main event of the entire thing. And in the evening on Saturday, there's this ceremony or ritual or event where politicians and military personnel and generally just high-ranking individuals from society in West Africa come to this village to talk to the Sheikh. And so they are seated on this platform in front of all the followers, and Sheikh Abdulrahman Bari is placed right in the middle. And during this event, people, first of all, there is a lot of spontaneous dhikr chants that erupts in the audience and stuff, but the politicians and the Sheikh, they hold speeches, and so they talk about the relationship between politics and Islam and things like that. Like they spoke mostly in Wolof, or French, so I didn't really understand most of it, so I had to have it translated by my informants later. And what they told me was that the Sheikh holds a speech to all the politicians and to all the guests that are there. And he holds this long speech about ethics and talks about that they need to be kind to the people, they need to treat them with respect and tolerance and kindness, and that the only reason they have power is because of the people, and so they are not supposed to forget about the people. And this is a way, I think, or I argue, to reaffirm the relationship between politics and religion, or Islam specifically, to show that these politicians and the politics of these countries still adhere to those ethical ideas of the religion, which give them a legitimacy. If they show that they are following the Sheikh and they listen to his advice and affirm that relationship with the religion, that gives them political legitimacy. And this is a continuation of a history in Senegal and the Gambia that goes back over 100 years. It was the same during colonial times, where the marabouts or sheikh often acted as a mediator between the colonial powers and the people. And even after independence, the same was true in a sense, because the politicians and the marabouts always had a strong relationship with each other. So for example, if a sheikh or marabout supported a political candidate, that dramatically increased his opportunity to win the election. So it's really interesting to see how this still prevails in a way. And I argue that this event, where the politicians listen to the speeches of the sheikh, is a way to reaffirm this relationship and to show that these two aspects of society, that is religion and politics, are still very much intertwined, even though Senegal and the Gambia both consider themselves to be secularized countries or have a secular democracy. Bogal is a very special place to these people, and it has sort of a sacredness to it as well. Not only the sheikh himself, but the village. I was talking to one of the followers of this group while I was there, and I asked about things like smoking or drinking alcohol and music and stuff. And he said that, well, a lot of people here are smokers, but no one smokes in this village. If they feel like they have to smoke, then they have to step outside the village limits and smoke outside and then come back in. Which shows you, again, that the city has a kind of sacredness to it. And as smoking and drinking is considered in a negative light, according to most, at least, Islamic doctrines, there is this tendency that you have to, as academics call it, step outside of the ritual frame or the sort of sacredness of the place in order to do those things that are considered inappropriate in a religious setting. Like I said, the same goes for drinking alcohol and also to some degree music. It's not like music is forbidden, but it's generally avoided by most people. But then again, sometimes in the evenings as we were sitting outside the house socializing, someone would put on some music on a phone or something like that. So it's not that strictly enforced, let's say. You may perhaps have heard that Sufism is characterized by asceticism and celibacy or stuff like that, like it's monks, like Christian monks, and this isn't necessarily true. There is a kind of ascetic tradition within Sufism, and the saints, like Bari, for example, does live a somewhat ascetic life, but in no way are they cut off from society usually. In most cases, you are encouraged to still partake in society and live according to the Sunnah of the Prophet and the Sharia. But there are some Sufi ideals that people like to adhere to that is characteristically kind of ascetic. For example, you're not supposed to be prideful, but be very humble and not be too attached to worldly things. And while not all Sufis, of course, adhere to that, people like, for example, Bari, at least outwardly, appear to do so. Not only are almost miraculous stories told about him, that before he was born you couldn't strike water, but after he was you could, and that he has blessed this well in the village that if you drink it, it will cure all your illnesses, both mental and physical. These very sort of magical, miraculous stories are told to uplift him, to be very unique and in contact with some other source, the divine in this case, God. And these stories are also corroborated by some of those ideals in how he lives now, that he lives somewhat ascetically, that he's very humble. He isn't directly involved or interested in politics. He gives away a lot of charity, and all the money he receives, he gives to others and things like this. He maintains that ideal of a Sufi saint. And furthermore, during the different rituals and stuff, he is always seated on a heightened platform above everyone else, also to symbolically and aesthetically show that he is unique, that he is different from other people. Another example of this is that he, like I mentioned earlier, he doesn't talk himself. He always has someone beside him that he whispers to, and then this person paraphrases what he says with a microphone. And this is another way of asserting his uniqueness, to setting him apart from people, and for him to have this role as a charismatic, authoritative figure that is a mediator between God and the common folk, or God and his followers. There's a lot of charity happening in this village as well. Not only does, like I said, the Sheikh give away a lot of his gifts, or all of his gifts according to his followers, but the community itself sort of partakes in a lot of charity. So for example, in the morning they would often slaughter a cow and then cook it and make a lot of food from it. And everyone in the compound would eat that food, but also the food would be given away to those in the village who didn't have the ability to cook their own food or didn't have the money. So there was this constant charity of giving away food and welcoming people to eat with us. That was also a very prominent and important aspect of this pilgrimage, which also added to that sense of community and that sense of being welcomed, and a very sort of peaceful and really beautiful place to be in a lot of ways. For a lot of the people coming there, it is a way to reaffirm an identity and a way to come together as a group of people. Once there, you'll be struck by the incredible kindness and warmth of the people and how welcomed you'll feel. I've never really experienced anything like it. It didn't matter that I was Swedish or that I'm Christian or any of those things. I was made to feel like I was part of the group, like I belonged there. And that's something that I think we can all learn from. It was an incredible experience. I was talking to my friend Sait while I was there, and I asked him how he felt about being there and being on this pilgrimage. And he said he felt really good, especially to experience what real Islam is. And I asked him what he meant by that. What is real Islam? And he just said, well, look around you. Everyone takes care of each other. Everyone is nice to each other. There are thousands of people in this village, but there is not a single fight, not a single crime, nothing like that. It is a community made up of love and peace, and that is to him what Islam is all about. That is real Islam. This, of course, is in great contrast to what a lot of people, especially here in the West, think Islam is. I don't need to even describe the kind of images that we get of Islam and the opinions people have of Islam. And it's really striking to see the difference in opinion of those people who actually live that tradition and those who don't, or maybe don't have any experience with it. Without making any claims about what Islam is or isn't, because I can't do that. A religion like Islam is an incredibly diverse traditions of all kinds of different expressions. But what I can say is that what I experienced while I was in Bogal and what I experienced when visiting the group in Stockholm even, is that very Islam that my friend Sait was describing. I'm a great believer in the value of meeting people and getting to know people from other cultures and people you may not agree with, for example. There's a lot of political turmoil in Europe and North America and all around the world today, with a lot of far-right ideologies making their way into politics and stuff. And I think personally, if you want to try to work against bigotry and work against racism and all these very foul things that are kind of creeping into society again, information isn't gonna cut it. You can't talk to someone who has a certain idea about Islam and just give them information and they will believe you because they have very strong beliefs already. The only thing that's really gonna change someone's mind is if they interact with other people. If a person who is afraid of Muslims or have negative opinions about Muslims actually get to know a Muslim person or a group of Muslims and talk to them, there's a lot bigger chance that they will change their mind than simply by trying to espouse counter arguments and information on them. By doing so, you'll notice that in most cases people are nice and people want to integrate into society. They want to be part of society. They want to respect the laws of the country they live in. And if your opinion is solely based on information about, for example, Islam, simply from the news or from the media, then of course you're going to have a negative opinion about it. It's like if all you knew about airplanes was based on the news, you'd think that every airplane crashes. But if you actually get to know people, if you meet people, if you talk to people, you'll notice that the reality of the situation is a lot more complex and often in opposition to what you see in the news. And therefore I urge everyone, whether you're an Islamophobe or from a far-right political party in Sweden or in Europe or whatever, or even if you're not one of those people, I urge you to go and meet these people, to go and talk to people. Even though, like I said, I can't say that Islam is this or that Islam is either peaceful or violent, because Islam is both those things. Any religion can lead to violence and any religion can lead to peace. But what I've experienced in Bogal and what I've experienced growing up with Muslim friends, meeting different Muslim groups and people of different cultures in general, is that in most of the cases, and especially in this case, in Bogal, what I experience is love and kindness and peace and community and a willingness to coexist peacefully with each other, whether they be from the same culture or from another culture, from the same religion or from another religion. That is the reality that I experience and experienced while I was on this pilgrimage. And if everyone can have just a slice of that same experience, then I think this world might become a better place eventually. So thank you, and I'll see you next time.
Mami, I know about anti-fragile. Léegi la def.
Lii rek la bëgg. Asli yàlla. Ku baax la. Anti-fragile la ku baax la.
Anti-fragile. Mais na me pare.
Koy jëli leen ko faatu bañ naa.